everyone, this is Patty Sandstrom, and I'm filming here from our farm in Clear Lake, Minnesota, where my husband and I have 12 acres on the Mississippi River, and I'm going to show you our gardens. And this is our in-ground garden, which is about 50 by 20, and we built this garden when we moved here 4 years ago. And I will show you what vegetables I have growing. We recently put this fence around the garden because here in the country we have quite a few critters that like to get into the garden, and so you need some type of protection from that. We have about 50 tomato plants that I planted within the last week, so these are just getting going here in the garden, getting acclimated to their new environment. And we have some here with tomato cages and some along this cattle panel fence that will be used to trellis up the tomatoes. As they grow taller, I will be tying them to the cattle panel to hold them upright. As you can see, below the tomatoes I do mulch, which is really important, especially for tomato plants. You want to make sure that if there's any splashback from rain or water, that the dirt and the water doesn't splash up on the tomatoes. That protects it from different fungal diseases. And we'll move down here. And as you can see, there's a lot of open area here yet. That's where I will be putting in my pepper plants this coming week, as well as eggplant, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, and Brussels sprouts will be coming. I'll be using this area here on the cattle panel for some melons that I will be planting this week as well. This area has peas, two different kinds of peas. Lincoln shelling pea and a sugar snap pea. And here, if you look closely, you can see some of my squash coming up that I planted by seed. There's some spaghetti squash there. I also have butternut squash and zucchini planted that are still not quite up yet. And the next area here, I have 2 rows of green beans, and those just started poking through the ground in the last week here, so you'll see those, as well as 3 rows of onions, red, yellow, and white onions. Then I have some radishes and carrots, and I like to sow a row that has radishes and carrots together because as I pull the radishes, that helps thin out the carrots a little bit, and also the radishes help mark the row because it takes longer for the carrots to come up. I also have some turnips right here, as well as 2 rows of different kinds of beets, yellow beets and red beets, and some kohlrabi as well. And if you look closely here, you'll see asparagus. And asparagus is one of the only perennial vegetables, so that comes up every year, and the shoots come up from the ground. Over this way, I have some more onions that I planted from onion plants. Some rhubarb that again comes back every year, and I've already started picking some of that last weekend for dessert. And then I have some additional leeks and onions down this way. And then throughout the garden I actually also plant marigolds for 2 reasons. I like to see flowers throughout the garden, as well as marigolds help detract rabbits and deer because they don't like the smell. Okay, so now we'll move on to another garden area. This is a new area of our garden. We have 2 new raised beds here with an arched trellis. And we will be growing a few different things in this bed. As you can see, there's a couple little things poking through. Those are some pole beans. They're actually Chinese red noodle beans that will grow up the trellis, and then the beans will hang down from the tops and the sides of the trellis for picking. And I will also be putting in a few different kinds of melons in here that will also trellis up the vine. So this will be a new experiment for us this year. Then next we have this water tank, and this is where I usually grow all of my greens, so lettuces, spinaches, things like that. So at the end we have some dill coming up that I use for cooking, and then when it gets larger and goes to seed, I use that for canning dill pickles. I have 4 different types of lettuce in here, various types, and some of those are just about ready to start harvesting. 2 different types of spinach, and that's looking wonderful, and that is ready to harvest. So we'll be eating a lot of spinach salads here in the next few weeks. I also have a baby bok choy, which that's a new experiment for us as well. That's not anything that we've ever grown before or even eaten before, but it looked interesting, so I thought I'd try it. And then I have 4 different types of radishes, and radishes are really one of the easiest and quickest growing vegetables that you can plant. So for a beginner gardener, I highly recommend trying radishes. And you not only can eat those fresh, raw, but you can also roast those. Cut them up and roast them in the oven with some oil and salt. And if you haven't tried that, give that a try. I also have some kale growing, one bigger plant, and then there's some little ones coming up as well. And then around the edge I have some more onions that I had extra sets for, and then some onions planted by seed that will be more like green onions. So that is that bed. Then here you can see that I'm growing potatoes this year in potato bags. I've done the bags before. I've also planted them in the garden, but this year I'm doing them strictly in bags to control the pests. I sometimes have more pests when I grow potatoes in the garden, so trying in the bags. And as you can see here, we're getting some sprouts above the ground there, and I'll be adding more soil to these bags as they grow bigger to provide more room for potatoes to grow under the soil. This is a new bed that we just built. My husband built a couple weeks ago, and we just planted about 25 strawberry plants last week, and these came to us as bare root plants, so it's neat to see those getting leaves and turning green. So hopefully we'll have some strawberries this year. And then this additional water tank, I grow more herbs in here. So this is some cilantro that's coming up, and I seed cilantro every couple weeks just to keep that going throughout the summer. And this is some parsley coming up. And then this middle section I will be using for basil. I'm doing a University of Minnesota seed trial with 6 different types of basil, so I will be transplanting those here shortly. And then finally, this bed is used for my cucumbers, and so the cucumbers grow, and I have trellising, so they will trellis up and as they vine. And I have a few coming up. These are planted by seed a few weeks ago, so those are just starting to come up above the ground. And quickly here I'll show you, I also have a blueberry bush. So if you can see that here, that's starting to sprout, so we'll have some blueberries this year hopefully. And then a large mound of raspberry bushes, that continue to spread every year. So we'll get a lot of raspberries out of that. Here's one additional perennial vegetable herb, I guess you could call it. This is horseradish, which comes back every year as a perennial, and you harvest the root of the horseradish in the fall and can make horseradish sauce. Here we have what I use as an herb garden, and herbs are very useful for different cooking recipes. So starting here is a perennial herb called chives, and chives is usually the first green thing that shows up in the garden every year. Comes back early and strong, and I use that in various potato recipes and dips, things like that. Next we have mint, which again comes back every year, used in different drinks and things like that. I have two different kinds of thyme, a lemon thyme and just a regular garden thyme. That is also a perennial. I have some parsley that reseeded itself from last year's parsley, so that came back on its own as well. And then I have oregano, which is also a perennial that comes back every year. Then I planted a few additional herbs, some catmint for the cats, some lemon bee balm, and then I have some sage that I like to use with my Thanksgiving turkey and dressing cooking. I also have additional perennial flowers in this bed, as well as more rhubarb. A little cameo of our chickens who enjoy the garden too. This is when I have overgrown cucumbers or squash, or I'm thinning seedlings. They get to enjoy that as well.